Greg and Nick Saban were in D.C. earlier this week talking with Congress about NIL and its viability as it relates to college athletics. And it's big because at the end of the day, it's what we see when it comes to basketball. It's what we see when it comes to football. And for anybody that loves college athletics, it will be something that has to be talked about. So I just wanted to kind of go through some of the comments that Nick and Greg made and just make everyone aware of kind of where that sits. So they were invited by Ted Cruz to be on a panel with an ACC commissioner and some other heads of the sport to talk about NIL and how it relates to college athletics. And one of the big things that was mentioned, and I'm going to read here from an excerpt from that quote, was that Nick Saban looked at it as his proposal was if we had some sort of revenue sharing proposition that did not make student athletes employees, I think that may be the long-term solution, Saban said. You could create a better quality of life for student athletes. You could still emphasize development and still create a brand in athletic development with a system like that. It would be equal in all institutions, and you couldn't raise more money at one school to create a competitive advantage at another. So that's the big thing, right? That's where NIL is looking at. It's because today it's really a pay for play. For anybody that's following college athletics, you can tell just by looking at transfers and where kids are going, who is forking out what money as it relates to college athletes. Saban mentioned in his recent interview that he did talking about why he left that I referenced in last episode that he had conversations with 70 to 80% of the players and all they wanted to talk about was what they were going to be getting paid or playing time. And Nick Saban ends up actually quoting Miss Terry in his comments for the in the actual his comments to Congress. He says his comments were all these times I believed in for all these years, 50 years of coaching, they no longer exist in college athletics. It's always been about developing players, about helping people, and becoming more successful in life. And then here it is. He said, after the event, Miss Saban told the story of one recruiting breakfast hosted at his home. His wife, Terry, typically talks with the mothers of recruits to assure them that their sons will be taken care of by Saban and the staff. After the event, Terry came up to Saban and said that the conversation solely rested on how much their sons were going to be getting paid. Ultimately, that shift rubbed both Sabans the wrong way. Nick quoted as saying, Miss Terry was like, why are we doing this? So it sounds like even though NIL is not the total and absolute reason that Saban hung it up, it was a huge reason that Saban hung it up. Because the college landscape and the way that they had developed players and gotten people to the NFL and, as he says, develop young men is not what it used to be. It's currently in what can I make right now? How much money are you going to pay me right now? And that's just a sad state of affairs. The reason why this is so important as it relates to NIL from an athletic director standpoint, Greg Byrne, mentions we're looking for safe havens from an employee status standpoint, from a Title IX standpoint, and just some safe havens from an antitrust standpoint so that we can have an enterprise of college athletics move forward and offer broad opportunities across the board. He was also quoted as saying they have 21 athletic programs currently at the University of Alabama. Many of them would not exist if it was not for football. Many of your Olympic sports, whether it be track and field or swimming or your other Title IX style sports when it comes to rowing or gymnastics, those events do not make the amount of money that football does. In fact, all of them lose money, but they're able to be funded based off of the athletic success of a football program. That's just how the finances of a college athletic department works. At most schools, you are going to have football making money, and in some cases, basketball making money. That's a very, very small percentage of the sports that are actually having coaches and players at them. Now, granted, those coaches and staffs are paid more than some of the others because they bring in that revenue, but there is a standpoint where the other coaches for other sports are still paid. The athletes are still funded. Greg Byrne has mentioned a couple times in interviews that the University of Alabama pays roughly $198,000 per year for a college athlete, male or female, in their time while at the University of Alabama. So at the end of the day, even if those other sports are not bringing in the revenue, if football was to go away or was to be separate from the university and completely in its own level and fully pay for play, and that those finances were completely removed from the athletic department as it sits today, it would do away with college athletics as we know it. Many sports would suffer and many schools would be forced to cancel athletic programs that they have today, as they just would not be able to afford it without college football being to foot the bill. And so, as we have noticed and are seeing through across other other colleges, their sports were going to go away. And that's what Greg doesn't want to see happen. So that's why they're lobbying Congress and trying to see if something can go to where this isn't a pay-for-play model. This is a level where nobody, whether it be Alabama or whether it be Houston, whether it be Cincinnati, whether it be Tulane, doesn't matter. No matter the school, they can pay the amount at a level playing field so that it's not the haves and the have-nots. Because as it sits today, whoever can raise the most money can pay the most money to their players, and whoever's paying the most money to their players typically in turn is going to have some of the best players, which will then mean you have the haves and you have the have-nots. So that's what they're trying to stop. So it'd be curious to see what comes out of this Congress session. Ted Cruz had many people there speaking, so I'm sure there'll be a lot more coming out about the bills that are going to be proposed, but that's something to keep an eye on as it relates to politics and college athletics, because this is something that is here to stay until we see some type of legislation or some type of ruling that says this is how athletics is going to have to operate. Because as it sits today, the viability of college football and college basketball as we know it is probably not for long. So that's just something to keep an eye on as it relates to college athletics.